This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the go-to place for building your own website, which is just what I did when I used Squarespace to build a site for my production company Galaxy Class Pictures. But if, for example, you wanted to create an online store, Squarespace has you covered with its huge selection of customizable templates. Simply choose a style you like and build your site using easy drag-and-drop tools. While designing, you can also grab yourself a domain name to make sure your site is as visible as possible when it goes live. Follow the link in the description to start making your own website with your own domain name and use the promo code Rowan Coleman for 10% off your first purchase. Thank you once again to Squarespace for helping me keep the lights on over here, and now, on with the video. When I was a child, science fiction was constantly on television. Every day I felt transported to strange new worlds aboard the USS Enterprise, was witness to the epic space opera of Babylon 5, and embarked on adventures through the ancient Stargate. For me, science fiction was defined by these shows and their related movies. I believed I had a firm grasp on what was and what wasn't science fiction. That is until my eyes were opened to something far stranger and wonderfully weird. In the late 1970s, the Jim Henson Company made a splash with The Muppet Show. While they had previous success with Sesame Street, The Muppet Show was a hit with viewers of all ages, and led to the creation of a full-blown media and merchandising franchise. It was thanks to this revenue, Henson's company was able to push the boundaries of what was possible with puppetry and animatronics, culminating in the cult classic fantasy films The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth. The spin-off company, Jim Henson's Creature Shop, further lent its talents in this field to other feature films such as The Return to Oz, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and Lost in Space. By the early 90s, Brian Henson became head of the Jim Henson Company after his father passed away in 1990. Unlike his father, Brian Henson was an enormous fan of science fiction, and wanted to create a TV show which could showcase the company's special effects skills. In his words, he wanted to create a show which was like the cantina from Star Wars but every single week. To create the show, Henson enlisted Rockne S O'Bannon, who was no stranger to science fiction. O'Bannon had previously worked on the 80s revival of The Twilight Zone and had written the feature film Alien Nation. O'Bannon and Henson both agreed that the way into the alien world they sought to create was to see it through the eyes of an ordinary man from our own time. Thus they devised the premise of an astronaut named John Crichton who is caught in a wormhole and shot into deep space, where he encounters an ensemble of strange alien creatures. Originally the title of the show was Space Chase, then Far Horizons, which became Farspace, and finally Farscape. Initially, the show was pitched to the Fox network, which had already seen great success with The X-Files, and wanted to develop another sci-fi series to complement the adventures of Mulder and Scully. Fox was receptive to Henson and O'Bannon's pitch, but ultimately chose to develop Space Above and Beyond instead of Farscape. Incidentally, Space Above and Beyond was cancelled after only one season. After Fox passed on Farscape, Henson and O'Bannon took the pitch to the Sci-Fi Channel. After building their brand mostly through reruns, the cable channel was looking to develop original shows, and the pitch for Farscape appealed to the head of the network greatly. According to a later Huffington Post interview with O'Bannon, he said, "The greatest words I've ever heard from the head of Sci-Fi were, 'Just make it as weird as you can, because I don't just want a kids show.' It took all the restraints off." However, without the financial support of a major network like Fox, Farscape, which would prove to be a hugely expensive show due to its elaborate special effects, would need to find a home outside of the USA. Canada was already home to Stargate SG-1, so most of the local crew with experience in special and visual effects were already occupied. For a while, Brian Henson looked at shooting the series in the UK, as the Creature Shop already had a base in London. In the end, Australia proved to be the best option. Not only did shooting in the country offer generous tax incentives, but also several experienced crew who had previously worked on The Matrix and Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace. The production was international in scope. Scripts would be written in Los Angeles, costumes, props, makeup and creature effects would be created in London, and filming would take place in Sydney. Also, because of the enormous expense of the series, the Sci-Fi Channel skipped over producing a pilot episode and instead committed to producing a full season right off the bat. Due to this relocation down under, only a single American actor was cast, Ben Browder as the lead, John Crichton. Browder's TV acting career began in the early 90s with a series of guest appearances on shows like Melrose Place and Murder, She Wrote before he landed a regular recurring role in the drama series Party of Five. Browder won the role of John Crichton out of over 200 applicants. There was a similarly large amount of candidates for the character Aaron Sun. While viewing audition tapes for Aaron and many other characters, Henson was quite taken by the voice he heard from off-camera feeding the auditioners lines. This voice belonged to Claudia Black, who was a friend of the casting director. Her off-camera presence in the audition tapes made quite an impression on the show's producers. Though her take on the character was quite different to what O'Bannon had in mind, it became obvious Claudia Black was the best choice for the character.
As we saw the actors relate to each other, we said, oh my God, they're like classic. They'll be able to spark off each other for 100 episodes.
We connected so wholeheartedly in the room. Something bizarre happened. And we did a great screen test together. And he was the one that said, you know, they had other choices, girls who were more attractive or whatever. And Ben said, no, Claudia's it. I want her.
Like Ben Browder, Claudia Black had mostly made guest appearances in various soap operas and police procedurals. She also made appearances on Hercules: The Legendary Journeys and later Xena Warrior Princess. After the first season of Farscape, she also appeared in the sci-fi horror film Pitch Black. To play the blue-skinned alien Zan, Virginia Hay was cast. After a successful modelling career, Hay's debut acting role was as the Warrior Woman in Mad Max 2 Road Warrior. After this, Hay led a successful career in film and TV, appearing in the Bond film The Living Daylights and the 80s revival of Mission Impossible. Another Mad Max veteran was Hugh Keys-Byrne, who auditioned for the Luxon warrior Ka Dargo. Keys-Byrne was later cast in the show as the businessman Grunschlick, but it was the towering Anthony Simcoe who landed the role of Dargo. Simcoe's only screen acting role before Farscape was in the Australian comedy film The Castle, but Simcoe had extensive experience acting on stage and performing music. New Zealand actor Lani Tupu also auditioned for Dargo, but was cast instead in the role of Bailar Crace. Tupu cut his teeth on stage in New Zealand before breaking into television in the series Country GP. He later moved to Australia where he landed guest roles in the Harve Bennett created series Time Tracks and Mission Impossible among many other shows. While the character of Dominar Rigel XVI would be created using puppetry and animatronics, the character's voice was provided by veteran of stage and screen Jonathan Hardy. Hardy would later appear in the series in person as the godlike Leviathan builder Kahenu. The cast was later joined by Gigi Edgley as Chiana. Initially only slated to appear in a single episode, the cast and crew liked her so much that she was upgraded to a recurring character and eventually a series regular. Filming took place primarily at Fox Studios Australia in Sydney. Like many sci-fi shows, several standing sets were constructed for the main setting, the living ship Moya. To communicate the vessel's organic nature, the art department designed many of the sets to resemble the inside of a ribcage, and avoided using the usual metallic colours of other fictional spaceships in favour of warmer earth and flesh tones. For the makeup effects, Anthony Simcoe was flown to London where a full body cast was taken of the actor, and the Dargo makeup was modelled to his exact proportions. Initially, the makeup and costume were extremely restrictive, and so Simcoe concentrated his performance in the voice of the character.
And then one night I was home mucking around with friends doing my version of movie trailers, so I'd be doing things like, "It's here. Jim Henson Productions presents the most exciting series on television." And all stuff like that. And I thought, wow, I've got to go into work tomorrow and see whether I could possibly get away with doing my movie trailer voice as my Dargo voice. And I went into work and I said, "Andrew, Brian, I've come up with it. I've got the voice for Dargo. I think the Dargo should sound like this." And they're like, "No, absolutely not. He's not going to sound like that." And we actually didn't make a decision until we got on set the very first day that I had to shoot as Dargo in the makeup. We still hadn't made a decision. Andrew Prowse, the director, was so busy with other things. I think I asked him at the right time because he had a million other things to think about, and I went up to him and I said, Andrew, I really think that I should speak like this. And he's like, all right, go do it. And so bang, we rolled the cameras, I was on, and I started speaking like that, and that's how the voice of Dargo came around.
Virginia Hayes' makeup for Zan didn't require a body cast, as it was almost entirely made from face and body paint. However, Hay did have to shave off all of her hair and her eyebrows. She later said in interviews that she looked more freaky without the makeup. To bring Dominar Rigel to life, puppeteer John Eccleston operated the character's mouth movements in much the same way the Muppets were done. To articulate the lip movements, Eccleston used a belt-mounted joystick to create the various mouth shapes as he spoke Rigel's dialogue live on set. Additional puppeteers used remote control servos to control the character's other facial muscles, as well as his hand and arm. The enormous pilot required up to 8 puppeteers, 1 for head movements, 1 for mouth movements, 1 for eyes and eyebrows, and 1 puppeteer each for his arms. Pilot's final voice was provided by Lanny Tupu, who reached the higher vocal pitch without any mechanical assistance. The actor devised a way of gradually working up to Pilot's higher pitch before each recording session, and stayed in the voice until all of Pilot's lines were recorded, after which additional filters were applied for the final voice. The on-set atmosphere of the show was markedly different to most sci-fi series productions. Star Trek and Babylon 5, for example, were produced with a strict adherence to the script. Actors changing lines or making suggestions about the story was frowned upon at best and contractually prohibited at worst. Farscape, however, being an Australian production far from Hollywood, had no such practices. This made Farscape an extremely collaborative show. In later audio commentaries, Claudia Black joked that even the studio's janitors got to voice their opinions on the scripts. While this contributed positively to the day-to-day working environment, it also played havoc with the show's schedule. Rockne S O'Bannon, Brian Henson, and executive producer David Kemper frequently pulled long hours to finalize scripts which were being added to constantly, and lock cuts of episodes which often had to jettison huge chunks of material. In later commentaries, Ben Browder joked that David Kemper would often turn in 75-page scripts for 45-minute shows, and the directors, usually feature film veterans as opposed to TV directors, would turn in weeks of footage at a time. The production opted to use CGI rather than building miniatures for Moya, the Farscape 1 module, and all the other ships. By the late 90s, this was common practice ever since Babylon 5 broke new ground by pioneering the techniques on a television budget and schedule. However, in Australia, there were no large visual effects companies. Those that did exist mostly worked on commercials as opposed to film and TV. Garner McLennan and his company Garner McLennan Design caught wind of the project and pursued the job. They enlisted the help of visual effects supervisor Paul Butterworth, though Butterworth later remarked in an interview for The Companion that at the time the job of a visual effects supervisor didn't even exist in Australia. Once they were given the job, Butterworth and McLennan effectively had to build their visual effects studio from scratch. In the Companion interview, Butterworth states that through their naive ambition, the team ended up delivering 1,800 shots for the first season, almost double the standard for shows like Star Trek or Babylon 5. For the music of the show, the producer hired Chris Neal on the recommendation of composer Matt Carroll of the musical group Subvision. Having viewed various designs and makeup tests during pre-production, Neil submitted a demo to the producers. Subvision was then hired to create the main theme and score the first season. Abigail Herman performed the vocals for the main melody, which were then multiplied and distorted for a truly alien sound. After years of development and a chaotic 10-month-long production, the first season of Farscape began airing on the 19th of March, 1999.
If you must address me, do so as your supreme eminence, which you should be doing anyway. I just punched myself.
From the very first frame, it's striking just how visually and sonically rich Farscape is. Even before Crichton is shot into deep space, the opening few scenes on Earth look more like something out of a feature film than a TV show. That being said, Crichton's introduction to this bizarre alien world packs plenty of impact by stacking the strange elements on top of one another. First is the wormhole, which uses a similar visual inspiration to Stargate's portals, only much more kinetic. Afterwards, Crichton finds himself drifting in an asteroid belt before being crashed into by a Peacekeeper prowler. But the truly alien nature of this part of space sinks in with the first shot of Moya, the circling prowlers used to convey the immense size of the Leviathan. And finally, the introduction to the main cast. A trio of creatures with more diversity and design between them than most aliens seen in an entire season of Star Trek. All of it is underpinned by the appropriately otherworldly music, which doesn't resemble any recognizable instrument. This stream of surprises continues throughout this scene and the episode as a whole, particularly with Erin's introduction. At first, the presence of the black-suited prowler pilot signals danger, and as the pilot removes their helmet, the viewer, like Crichton, wonders what new monstrosity lurks beneath, only to see the very human face of Claudia Black. But letting down his guard only gets Crichton beaten to the ground and pinned in a strangely erotic fashion while Erin drills him with questions he has no hope of answering. In general, the characterization of the ensemble continues to evolve in surprising ways. Erin Sun goes from intimidating and militaristic in her first scene,
Officer Erin Sun, Special Peacekeeper Commando, Icarian Company, Plysar Regiment.
to cunning and facetious in the next,
I'd eat, if I were you.
Attention, we are approaching a continuous...
It may be the only chance we get.
and finally compassionate and convicted.
You know something about this alien?
Only that I have spent time with him, sir, and I believe him when he says that what happened to your brother was an accident.
And this is just one of the main characters in the first episode. One would expect that by the end of the premiere, the viewer would have a firm idea of who these characters are and the dynamic between them. However, as the first season continues, the surprises keep coming. The first few episodes of Farscape Season 1 are mostly standalone episodes built around familiar sci-fi series concepts. Time loops, planets of the week, ship in danger bottle episodes, these are all ideas which were already featured in the likes of Star Trek, and so Farscape, perhaps in a conscious effort by the writers, reuses these familiar tropes to clearly demonstrate what makes Farscape so different from those other shows. While most sci-fi shows portray characters in a military hierarchy, where each person's role aboard the ship or station is clearly defined, and everyone has received substantial training in a particular field, the crew of Moya have no such structure. They're simply a group of people thrown together by circumstance. Though they each have their own goals, there is no larger mission which unites them beyond simply evading the Peacekeepers. Another huge departure is one of tone. Science fiction has long had a reputation as a genre more about technology than about people. Uniformed characters talking about starships or space anomalies and the like. Fans of these shows know that isn't the case, but it's easy to see why a casual viewer might see the likes of Star Trek or Babylon 5 as stuffy or stilted. Farscape, however, sets itself apart from these shows by being overtly weird and comedic. The cast has since said that they were encouraged in the early episodes to break the traditionally formal trappings of sci-fi and go for the gag whenever possible. Having a mostly Australian crew in the aforementioned collaborative working environment leads to a distinctly Aussie sense of humour throughout the series. That's not to say Farscape is devoid of serious drama or fascinating sci-fi concepts, far from it. The show's weirdness often facilitates these elements rather than hinders them. In Back and Back and Back to the Future, for example, the triangle of sexual tension between Dargo, guest character Matala, and Crichton contributes to the mind-bending temporal shenanigans of the plot. Crichton already has enough to deal with trying to wrap his head around the time loop only he is aware of. Add to that Matala trying to seduce him and Dargo threatening him to stay away from her, and he becomes so mixed up intellectually, emotionally, and even sensually that we get a real sense of his mind coming apart at the seams. It's very weird to watch, but that doesn't stop it from being compelling. Just like the show as a whole, the characters cannot be defined by any one thing, and don't fit into the usual tropes often seen in sci-fi. Ben Browder's John Crichton visually embodies the typical all-American pulpy space hero. This is why it's interesting to note that Crichton is not the action hero of the series. That role goes to Erin. Instead, Crichton's intellect is emphasized. His expertise in astrophysics is what allows them to escape Crace in the first episode, yet he isn't the typical nerd archetype either. Crichton is a loud-mouthed, pop-culture referencing adrenaline junkie, but he's also a sensitive soul who wants to assume the best in people. Simply put, there is a hell of a lot more to John Crichton than a square jaw, and the same sentiment applies to the other main characters of the show. At first glance, Dargo is the typical warrior alien akin to Star Trek's Worf, but as it turns out, Dargo is a teenager among his people.
How old are you?
30 cycles.
You are but a boy.
I am not.
This small fact suddenly changes the context of all the usual warrior alien tropes. His aggression and bravado come from a place of insecurity. He is constantly trying to prove himself as the formidable Luxon warrior he appears to be. On top of this, the revelation that he's already a father at such a young age turns the entire character archetype on its head. This isn't a badass alien warrior who's there to drive the action scenes, but an insecure and frightened young man who's just trying to get his life together. Likewise, Zan's status as a priestess naturally makes her the conscience of the crew. She is often the one dispensing wisdom to the others. Yet there's also a strong sensuality to Virginia Hayes' performance, which adds an extra dimension to her scenes of quiet consoling with the other characters. Zan is also more than capable of dishing out considerable violence. This mix of sensuality and violence is folded into the character's backstory when it's revealed she used her psychic abilities to murder someone while they were intimate. Once again, the archetype is flipped on its head. To make another Star Trek comparison, Zan is not the Guinan of this group, but someone desperately searching for redemption for what she's done. And then there's Rigel, who is simply a wonderful creation, and like the rest, breaks with his expected archetype. The design of the character conveys a sense of illustriousness and quiet dignity, but in reality, Rigel is pompous, believing himself to be above his shipmates. He's often the butt of many jokes, but he's also cunning and resourceful, doing whatever it takes to stay alive, and dishing out revenge whenever the opportunity presents itself. The latter half of Season 1 is where Farscape truly comes into its own. First, the episode A Human Reaction breaks two unspoken rules when it comes to episodic television. Firstly, considering the premise of the show is Crichton trying to find a way home, seemingly paying this off within the first season is a bold choice to say the least. The viewer's natural suspicions that this could be a hallucination, dream, or some other form of unreality are gradually suppressed as the events unfold. The episode is diligent in not giving the game away, while still planting a few clues as to what's really going on. The second rule broken concerns the progression of the Crichton and Erin will they won't they romance. Whereas other shows would stretch this out for many seasons, Farscape conclusively states in its first season that they will indeed. The writers even made sure to clarify this in a later episode.
Right, and how many times have you and I been close?
And despite the revelation that Crichton hasn't returned to Earth, effectively unbreaking the first rule, this is easily the most consequential episode of the entire series, as it kicks off the main story arc of the show. Which brings us to the introduction of Scorpius. Up until this point, Crais has functioned as the show's main antagonist, but he is easily topped by Wayne Pygram's Scorpius in his first scene.
I am Scorpius. But of course you are. You attempt to provoke me. Perhaps you're hoping I will lose my composure and kill you. I long ago learned the advantages of patience.
What makes Scorpius so instantly memorable is a sense of the uncanny. The costume and makeup design blends the sexual and grotesque into one monstrous form, but it's Pygram's choice to speak in a high-pitched, refined accent which makes the character so unsettling. We're seeing one thing but hearing another. And while Crais posed a deadly threat to Crichton, the threat posed by Scorpius goes beyond that. Scorpius is physically strong, but it's pretty apparent Dargo or Erin could best him in a fair fight, and Scorpius rarely even carries a weapon. Scorpius doesn't win by killing people, he wins by breaking people. Whereas being caught by Crais would signal the end for John Crichton, being caught by Scorpius would only be the beginning of the horrors to come. The cat and mouse game which ensues culminates in a stunning cliffhanger finale, which sees Crais taking command of Moya's hybrid offspring and the main characters broken up and marooned. This was a brave note to end the first season on, considering a renewal for a second was by no means guaranteed. While its US ratings were mediocre, the series was an international success. The show was produced by the Sci-Fi Channel, but it aired almost simultaneously on YTV in Canada, 9 Network in Australia, and BBC Two in the UK. This allowed Farscape to accrue a passionate cult fanbase in its first year, small in size in any one country, but impressive worldwide. The show was also well liked by Sci-Fi Channel executives, who enjoyed having an original series for the channel which wasn't simply a copy of other established shows. Willing to roll the dice once again, Farscape was renewed for a second season. This renewal didn't come without problems, however. As Farscape was about to re-enter production, Fox Studios Australia decided not to renew its contract with the series. Instead, the studio was given over to the production of Star Wars Episode II: Attack of the Clones. As a result, Farscape had to completely uproot and move to a new facility in Homebush, Sydney. This was not a purpose-built film studio, and so the cast had to re-record up to 90% of their dialogue in each episode due to poor sound on set. According to the aforementioned companion articles, there was also some studio politics at play which harmed the production. Subvision member Chris Beale later said he believed Sci-Fi Channel was trying to exert more control over the show, resulting in numerous crew members either leaving the series or being let go. This was the case with Garner McLennan's team, who were replaced by the visual effects studio Animal Logic, and with Subvision itself. According to Beale, the music department was told to make their scores bigger and more orchestral, which didn't gel with Subvision's usual style or what they had done on the series thus far. Therefore, they were let go, and composer Guy Gross was brought in to take over scoring the series. Season 2 runs with all of the strengths of Season 1, feeling much more confident in its identity. Standalone episodes aren't just new spins on familiar tropes, but uniquely weird in the way only Farscape can be, and always centered on the characters. These are episodes like the fan-favourite Crackers Don't Matter, in which an alien called Traltix boards Moya as the ship passes through a binary star system. Soon after, everyone goes partially insane as they all become convinced each one of them is stealing and hoarding a recent shipment of crackers, except Zan, who, being a plant, spends most of the episode having photogasms. Between Scorpius-fueled hallucinations, Crichton runs around trying to convince everyone that Traltix is messing with their minds in some way.
Thank you, so much better!
You missed! Ah!
The episode concludes with Crichton confronting Traltix while covered in puke.
We are going to die.
Crackers Don't Matter is an incredible demonstration of Farscape's command of tone. There's plenty of comedy mined from each character's strange behaviour, but there are also disturbing moments such as Dargo nearly killing Rigel by force-feeding him crackers.
I am ashamed of what I did.
I thought you were going to kill me.
Can you forgive me?
No. Not yet.
It's simultaneously one of the most hysterically funny and strange Farscape episodes, while also being one of the most poignant. When it comes to emotionally moving the audience, however, no episode in Season 2 does this better than The Way We Weren't. After the crew discovers a recording of Erin executing Moya's original pilot, the others debate if they should keep her on the ship, while she is left to wrestle with her guilt. Claudia Black is instantly iconic as Erin Sun from the very first episode. Not only does she look great wielding big guns in button-down action hero clothes, but also kitted out in various leather jackets and trench coats. But Erin is by no means one note. Black's considerable comedy chops also add a lot of charm and humour to Erin's character, with a flurry of badass one-liners, witty comebacks, and terrific insults.
Don't feel bad, it's not you, it's me. I don't like you.
But The Way We Weren't is the first time we see the character truly vulnerable, as she breaks down from the guilt over her past actions. It's in this episode that Erin becomes a part of the Moya family, as opposed to being there simply through circumstance. At first, her past isolates her from the rest of the crew, but in the episode's climax, her bond with the others is strengthened after Pilot reveals their culpability in what happened as well.
Do you remember when you first came aboard, Moya? Elric stroked your cheek like this to calm you. Back then I couldn't fathom why he'd do a thing like that. And now I couldn't fathom not doing it. We've come a long way since then, Pilot, and we've still got a long way to go. Take the journey with me.
It's a testament to all aspects of Farscape's production that despite all of the weirdness, Farscape triumphantly succeeds in telling profoundly moving human stories. The majority of Season 2, however, is dominated by Scorpius' pursuit of Crichton for the wormhole knowledge in his head. Plot-wise, this cat-and-mouse game across the stars facilitates a never-ending stream of traps, double-crosses, and action set-pieces, which fill episodes to the brim with excitement and thrills. A highlight of these comes in the three-parter Look at the Princess, where Crichton is cornered by Scorpius' underling, Braca, only for Crichton to completely reverse the situation by using himself as a meat shield.
One wound, I bleed out. Oh, Officer Braca, what the hell happened?
Fine, let's do it then. Let's do this thing. Come on, shoot me. Right here, right here. Go. Oh, no, not the brain. He wants the brain. The heart. Here. Heart. Here. John Wayne Bobbitt. The Inner Boy Squire.
Before madly punching controls and activating weapons so the surrounding orbital defenses will open fire on the very spacecraft he is currently on.
We're so screwed, Ian. We're gonna die.
And finally propelling himself through the vacuum of space using a pulse rifle to reach safety. A stunning action set piece and a great showcase of Browder's increasingly unhinged portrayal of Crichton. But the substance of Crichton's battle of wits with Scorpius comes from the undeniable sexual overtones which permeate their relationship. It's by no means an accident that Scorpius and his entourage wear costumes resembling fetish gear. After all, Scorpius' main method of interrogation is to restrain his victims and break down their mental and emotional barriers. Scorpius doesn't simply want to capture Crichton, but to use him, to dominate him psychologically and physically. Scorpius does not hate Crichton, in fact he cares deeply for Crichton's well-being, but only as a tool he can use. I'd go into more detail about this, but unfortunately doing so ventures into areas YouTube doesn't really like. So if you want to see these retrospectives uncut and ad-free, the link to my Patreon is below this video. Knowing they had gold on their hands with Wayne Pygram's performance as the character, the writers needed a way of including Scorpius in as many episodes as possible, but without making the character seem incompetent in the number of times Crichton escapes his grasp. Thus the neural clone known as Harvey was created. Harvey's inclusion was yet another way of amping up the show's weirdness factor, with entire scenes playing out within Crichton's warped mind. Farscape in general places a lot of emphasis on Crichton's mental and emotional state throughout the series. It's worth remembering Crichton's background is as a scientist, not a soldier or an operative. Therefore, when he is repeatedly subjected to life and death situations over the course of the series, it takes a real toll on the character. At times, Crichton veers completely into utter insanity in episodes such as Won't Get Fooled Again and the later Revenging Angel. It seems just as Crichton was getting used to his alien surroundings, reality itself starts to crumble around him. What makes Scorpius' inclusion in all of this so frightening is the sense that as Crichton loses control of his own mind, Scorpius asserts more control. Scorpius' domination of Crichton is what drives the shocking finale of Season 2. After the three-part action extravaganza, Liars, Guns and Money, Crichton's mind is at breaking point.
You're right, Aaron. There's no Scorpius here.
In true Farscape fashion, the show gives fans what they've been yearning for, only to twist it into something else.
I love you.
But what makes the final episode so shocking is the death of Aaron's son. The scene itself is gut-wrenching as Crichton watches helplessly as Aaron drowns in the icy cold water.
Crichton! Crichton!
However, it's the aftermath which drives home the tragedy. Once again, the writers know the audience expects this death to be a fake-out, and so draws out Erin's requiem, with each of the characters placing a parting gift within her capsule, typified by Dargo giving up his Quelta blade. As the audience is immersed in the tragedy, the end of the episode moves into horror territory as Scorpius corners Crichton and finally obtains the wormhole knowledge he's been after. Having reached the end of his usefulness, Scorpius leaves Crichton paralysed, unable to speak, and with his brain exposed. The end of Season 2 is a jaw-dropping cliffhanger. Thankfully, the continued goodwill towards the show and international success ensured Farscape's renewal for a third season. However, its middling ratings compared to the huge expense of the series was putting its future on thin ice. This wasn't helped by the increasing complexity of its ongoing storylines and the density of the show's lore. Though Farscape continued to feature episodic stories, it would be inaccurate to call any future episode truly standalone. Almost every episode relied on knowledge of past events to an extent that Crichton's opening voiceover didn't come close to encapsulating. The series was available on DVD by this point, but the lack of syndication hampered new viewers' ability to give Farscape a go. In an attempt to bring the show to a new audience and increase ratings, Sci-Fi Channel produced the documentary special Farscape Undressed, as a way of explaining the show to new viewers. Season 3 also came with a new opening credit sequence and a new theme, composed by Guy Gross. Gross's new theme for Farscape Season 3 is a spectacular achievement. The piece perfectly unites the two musical styles, preserving Subvision's tribal beats and weird vocals, but with an orchestral sweep to sonically illustrate the darker and more epic direction of the show. Despite many strengths in Season 3, Erin's resurrection is somewhat contrived and rushed. Mechanically, it's essentially magic. Zan uses her powers to find Erin's soul and restore it to her body. Erin's comeback is fittingly badass, using Dargo's Quelta blade to fend off some Peacekeeper commandos right out of the coffin, but Crichton's reunion with Erin isn't given the emotional heft it should have had. Although Erin's resurrection proved to be inevitable, the crew still sustains a loss in the form of Zan's departure. Virginia Hay leaving the show came as quite a shock to the makers and fans of the show, but Hay later explained in interviews that her chief reason was her health.
I was experiencing some problems about 3 months into shooting the first season, and I went to the doctor. He phoned me at work a week later and he said, it's kind of funny, I mean it's awful but it's funny. He said, the lab just called me, it's about your test, your urine test. What is it that you're doing? Are you working in a pesticide factory? Because they've found so many chemicals in your urine that they can't quite figure out what you're doing. Are you working in a paint factory? What are you doing? Oh, I'm an actress and I'm working on a sci-fi show and I'm in blue prosthetic makeup. He went, what? Come and show me what you're doing. So I took a photograph and he said, oh my God, that's why you should leave this show immediately. I said, I can't do that. I've just started. I love the character. He said, but this is insane. What are you putting into your body? It's just insanity. And you do this for a long period of time. For a film, it's okay. You can really put your body through a lot of grief for 3 or 4 or 5 months, or even 6 months. You really can. And it'll bounce back. But year after year is a whole other story. But I was really falling apart, getting pretty much everything that went. My immune system was just a mess. Constantly and so ill. And I just thought, the doctors that I was seeing at one of the hospitals near the studio were just saying, why are you doing this? I'd say, well, she's a beautiful character, but she's fictitious, Virginia. She's not real. Yeah, but she's real to me. No, but you are really damaging your health. Why would you want to damage your health for a job?
While the crew are joined by new characters like Tammy McIntosh's Jewel, Zan's loss is keenly felt throughout the rest of the season, which sees the Moya crew venturing into darker territory than ever before. The show expands in scope, leaning into the looming threat of a war between the tyrannical Peacekeepers and the monstrous Scarans. Although the Peacekeepers are hardly a force for good with their fascistic ideology and interstellar police state, next to the Scarans they seem positively utopian. In episodes like the Scorpius-centric Incubator, we see first-hand the cruelty of the Scarans. In a sense, they represent a similar threat posed by Scorpius himself, but on a galactic scale. The Scarans see other species as mere tools to be used for their ends, as slave labor, food sources, or even breeding stock. Up until this point, the Scarans were mostly kept to the background, but Season 3 carries a sense that this looming conflict will soon be coming to a head. This darkness even permeates usually episodic outings. Seemingly weird one-off incidents like Crichton being split into two people result in a powerful character-driven arc for the season. When the characters are split between Moya and Talon, Erin's romance with one of the Crichtons reaches a tragic end when this Crichton dies of radiation poisoning while stopping the Scarans from obtaining wormhole technology.
I don't hurt. I did some good things. I'm proud of my life. Don't worry about me. I've never felt better.
This death marks the beginning of the show's darkest chapter, as the relationships of the characters rapidly disintegrate. Not only does Crichton's death shatter the possibility of a relationship between Erin and the remaining Crichton, but there's also Chiana's infidelity with Dargo's son, and Talon's debilitating illness, rendering him unable to distinguish friend from foe.
You have not disappointed me. I don't hold you responsible. Neither does Moya or Nana. On the contrary, Talon, you are very brave.
With everything coming apart at the seams, the season finale functions as the ultimate Hail Mary. Crichton chooses to stop running and give Scorpius his wormhole knowledge in exchange for unconditional pardons for everyone else, though in reality he's there to sabotage the project. It's a high-stakes battle of wits where any wrong move could spell the end for everyone. Even Scorpius isn't safe when he's put under the thumb of Rebecca Riggs' Commandant Grazer, forcing Scorpius to threaten Earth itself if Crichton doesn't give him results.
What do you think holding a freaking gun on my planet is gonna motivate me to help you? I have run out of time!
But it's Krace who emerges as the unlikeliest of heroes. Lani Tupu's performance as the character has always been one of the show's highlights. Despite being the principal antagonist in the first half of Season 1, Krace is a deeply sympathetic character. Unlike Scorpius and Grazer, his hunt for Crichton was driven by personal trauma at the death of his brother. By the time Scorpius is introduced, it's clear Krace has overstepped, and he becomes a victim of Scorpius and the Peacekeeper power structures just like Crichton and Erin. His surrender to Crichton at the end of Season 1 can be seen as the start of a redemption arc of sorts for the character, but it's redemption the Moya crew refused to give him, forcing him to ally with Talon just to survive. During their time living aboard Talon, Crichton and Erin never fully forgive Krace for his past actions, but it becomes clear he's no longer their enemy. It's worth noting Krace never bullies Talon into submitting to his control, but rather Talon bonds himself to Krace willingly. It's never said explicitly in the show, but Talon essentially becomes a new surrogate brother for Krace. Krace having lost everything that ever mattered to him, and Talon feeling scared and alone due to his hybrid nature, only have each other to count on. This is why it's so fitting that they go out together as brothers, committing one final selfless act.
Talon. Starburst.
Generations will know that name. Because of you.
The Scannons will destroy us.
One evil at a time. If we're gonna get off this boat, now would be a good time.
I may not be getting off this ship, Joe.
Goodbye, Crichton.
Pilot is a creature of his word. We have not moved 1 metra. We're just drifting.
Sure, he dropped something.
Spewing.
For the next season of Farscape, Brian Henson sought to make a 4th and 5th season in a single package, therefore reining in the expense of the series. While the Sci-Fi Channel tentatively agreed to this, they made sure to retain the ability to axe the show should it go over budget. This sword of Damocles now hanging over the show came as a result of Farscape no longer being the Sci-Fi Channel's only hit original. By this time, Stargate SG-1, which originally aired on Showtime, had been picked up by the Sci-Fi Channel and was outperforming Farscape in the ratings, while also being much cheaper to produce. Though Farscape was still well liked by sci-fi execs, it was no longer the channel's flagship series. Season 4 kicks off with the situation more desperate than ever, with the crew scattered and Crichton marooned on a dying Leviathan. There he meets the new recurring character Sikozu, played by Rayleigh Hill, and later rejoined by Melissa Jaffer's Noranti, who was introduced at the end of Season 3. The first half of Farscape Season 4 struggles somewhat as the Moya crew are slowly reunited. It feels as if the show is bending over backwards to return to the usual status quo. The pardons each character received at the end of Season 3 are suddenly revoked, and Crichton et al. Are once again on the run from the Peacekeepers, this time led by Grayza, who seek the wormhole knowledge in Crichton's head. There are a few too many resets here, as if the writers realised they had essentially written themselves into the story's conclusion too early. Not only are the characters made fugitives once again, but Aaron and Crichton's relationship is at an impasse again, and smaller elements like Harvey are supposedly done away with, only to come back later on. New additions to the show are also controversial, namely Scorpius joining the Moya crew. Having been the chief villain for most of the show up until this point, it's quite a leap to bring the character onto Moya like this. Considering the amount of emotional, psychological, and physical damage Scorpius inflicted on Crichton and the others, the notion that he would even be allowed to set foot on Moya and that Erin would defend him after he saved her life is difficult to buy. The writers take a good stab at making it work, but this turn of events never feels truly believable. I feel Scorpius met a fitting end in Season 3, but it seems fan and creator enthusiasm for the character couldn't let Scorpius die. Make no mistake, Season 4 is by no means a failure because of this, and Wayne Pygram continues to excel in the role, but even Pygram was aware of how the character was being misused here.
Season 4 was probably, for me, my most problematic year. By bringing me on board Moya, created a lot of problems for me as an actor. I found myself in situations where I knew that I shouldn't be privy to particular conversations or be in a room at a particular time, and I found it, I felt in my acting, and it's been confirmed since I watched the episodes, that my acting style and he got more naturalistic and more human. So we got away from him, his magic, I thought.
Thankfully, the latter half of the season gets things back on track with the mind-bending Unrealized reality.
Time.
Sup?
Time.
Flies.
Time.
Bandits.
Time.
Wounds all healed.
Time.
Rosemary and time. Sup?
What was clearly intended as a semi-clip show to save money takes on a life of its own as a trippy, labyrinthine journey through multiple timelines which, in true Farscape fashion, takes every opportunity to be as weird as possible, notably with a bizarro version of Moya where each character is played by one of the other actors with hysterical results. But after all this time-bending, it's the closing minutes which prove to be the most surprising. Having been lost in deep space for over 3 years, Crichton finally returns home to find it is not the same world he left, nor is he the same person. While not remotely as morbid as Crichton's original vision of returning home, the two-parter Kansas and Terra Firma are both mined extensively for as much rich drama as possible. In a stroke of brilliance, it is now Crichton's home planet, which seems so alien to him. The familiar surroundings, the mundanity of domestic life, it all seems strange following the 3.5 seasons worth of fantastical adventures. Crichton has not only become a stranger to his own home, but he's also been so damaged by past events that the long-awaited family reunion becomes a tense standoff rather than a loving embrace. This tension is finally broken when Crichton and Erin fend off an assassin sent by Grazer, and it becomes clear Crichton can no longer call Earth his home.
I can't shake this feeling that you're not coming back.
I'll be back. That's a promise. You take care of my home.
Rounding out the season is the 3-part epic We're So Screwed, which cranks up the number of double crosses, standoffs, and action set pieces to a near ludicrous degree. The final few episodes of the season also feel overstuffed at times, rushing through crucial story points and introducing and paying off brand new pieces of world building. Erin goes from being heavily traumatized by her torture at the hands of the Scarans.
Is this real?
It's real. You're safe.
To quipping and joking alongside Crichton in the very next episode.
What are you doing here? Come out, now!
There's never enough time.
The final episode of the season almost skips over its setup entirely, flashing back and montaging through scenes which were no doubt written and shot, but severely cut down for time. There's also the introduction of a Kalish resistance, Sikozu's genetically engineered Scaran killing abilities, and the Scarans largely owing their intelligence to the consumption of a particular plant. It's a lot to take in as several long-established plot and story threads also come to a head in the same few episodes. That being said, the final episode of the season, Bad Timing, ties the year off brilliantly. Though the opening few minutes are whiplash-inducing, the race to close the wormhole to Earth is full of tension, and capped off with a moving scene of Crichton saying goodbye to his father forever.
The heart and soul of my life, son. I love you.
This emotional resonance extends to the final scene of the episode, as Crichton and Erin finally agree to be together forever. Ben Browder and Claudia Black's terrific chemistry is one of the consistent highlights of Farscape. It's tempting to say they bicker like an old married couple even from the first episode, but it's more than that. There's an undeniable passion between them which is sometimes expressed healthily, but often expressed unhealthily. They are both drawn to each other from the start. Crichton is drawn to Erin as she's the only human-like face he encounters in this part of the galaxy, and Erin is drawn to Crichton because he's unlike anyone she's ever met. And to put this bluntly, Crichton and Erin are both really hot, and the early episodes take every opportunity to put the two in suggestive body positions, partly to play up the tension between them, but also to tease the audience in a way. The viewer is shown repeatedly how perfect these two look as a couple, making their series-spanning romance seem inevitable from the outset. But their connection is more than skin deep. They are the catalysts of each other's emotional arcs. Erin was raised in a culture where emotion was seen as weakness, but she learns from Crichton that it's okay to be vulnerable. Crichton, meanwhile, begins the series as a wide-eyed explorer, but his many traumas end up forcing him to shut down and close himself off or disconnect entirely from reality rather than face his pain. These mirrored arcs clearly illustrate why these two need each other. Erin needs Crichton because he's the only one she can truly open up to, and Crichton needs Erin to keep him grounded. This is why the end of Season 4 is so heartbreaking, because after everything they've endured, these two finally have a future together.
Will you marry me?
But then...
John! Aaron! Get inside!
You and your timing.
I love you.
And it's on this devastating cliffhanger that Farscape was cancelled.
I was at a convention in, excuse me, Las Vegas. And a fan came up to me and said, all bright and cheery, how do you feel about the show being cancelled? I went, I'm sorry, just say that again, please. And they said, oh, you haven't heard? I said, no. Is there something I should know?
We knew that things were going rocky, but then we thought he'd sort of saved it at the last minute. And I think, as Brian explained to me, he did too, right up to the last second. He went to bed the night before thinking it was sorted that season 5 was going to go ahead. And then woke up and it was gone.
My last day of shooting, which was, I think, a Thursday, I said to Dave and Colin, remember today, boys, it could be the last time we do this. This could be the last time I have this makeup on. And they just went, you're mad. Forget it. You'll be doing this for the rest of your life. That was the last day.
I could understand how it happened. Sci-fi would say, we can't afford it. Maybe we'll do a half season. They wanted to do a half season. Well, now the international investors, the MTV, were going, oh, we don't have to do a whole season? Well, we're not sure we're not contractually obligated to do a half season. It was one of these where it was a house of cards, a financing house of cards that I was trying to hold together that kept tripping, it kept falling over here and it was falling over here. And I'd go on set and, the cast and the creative they'd be saying, are we on or are we off? And I'd say, looks like we're really on for season 5. So I'm sorry I scared everybody. I think we're on. And then 2 days later, it'd be, I think we're off. I can't believe it, but I think we're off. And then 2 days later, I think we're on. And 2 days later, I think all those people were so emotionally beat up by the end. I felt awful. And it was me trying to put together this financing house of cards that did turn out to be a collapsing house of cards. So it was really tough, and at the last moment, we had a wrap party that became a wrap party for the series instead of a wrap party for the season. And we had an episode that finished with a cliffhanger. And should we try to rework it so there's not a cliffhanger? No, we decided in the end. We decided, you know what, this is the way Farscape ended. It ended with a weird to be continued, so we're going to end the last episode with to be continued. The broadcasters were not very happy about that.
Following Farscape's cancellation in September 2002, Farscape fans did what seemingly all sci-fi fanbases do at some point in their lives. They started a massive campaign to bring the show back. Coordinated from the official Farscape fan website, the Save Farscape campaign sent a deluge of letters and emails to the Sci-Fi Channel, as well as numerous other networks to renew the series for a 5th season. While none of this changed the financial position the Sci-Fi Channel was in regarding the series, such a display of fan enthusiasm for Farscape allowed Henson to find financial backing from other sources.
What ended up happening was the financiers of the miniseries are not normally television financiers, and they saw this underground sort of thing going on with Farscape, bring it back, and then they became acquainted with the series, and then they were saying, we'd quite like to talk to you about helping to continue this thing. That was just amazing, and it took a little while to pull that whole deal together. But if it hadn't been for the Save Farscape movement, Farscape would have stopped at the end of season 4.
Partly backed by Hallmark Entertainment, Farscape was officially renewed in May 2004 as a 3-hour miniseries titled The Peacekeeper Wars, which would round off the series as a whole. Production once again took place in Australia, with Rockne S O'Bannon and David Kemper writing the screenplay, and Brian Henson stepping into the director's chair. Guy Gross reprised his role as composer for the miniseries, however this time he had the privilege of working with the Sydney Symphony Orchestra rather than the digital facsimile he had used for the series. However, most of the post-production sound team had to be replaced, as well as the on-set makeup team. When it came to replicating the looks of the various characters, the makeup team had tremendous difficulty with Noranti. Melissa Jaffer had a severe reaction to the new makeup, and was unable to film most of her scenes. There was an attempt at using actress Amanda Wenban to stand in for the character while Jaffer provided the voice, but the difference was too noticeable. Therefore, Noranti's role in the miniseries was cut down massively. Most other regular and recurring cast members returned, except Virginia Hay as Zan, who was offered a cameo but she declined. After a 2-year wait, Farscape: The Peacekeeper Wars premiered on the Sci-Fi Channel on the 18th of October 2004. Having finally transformed into a full-on space opera, Farscape: The Peacekeeper Wars takes on an epic cinematic feel, opening with a visually stunning space battle and bombastic orchestral score. The comparatively larger budget is reflected on screen, with large-scale sets and expansive locations, which Brian Henson makes sure to capture in spectacular wide shots. It's the familiar Farscape universe, but not as we've seen it before. The epic sweep of the miniseries also helps compensate for the areas where the miniseries has had to compress a season's worth of intended stories into only 3 hours. These are elements like the magical peacemaking aliens and Erin's truncated pregnancy. These accelerations are contrived, but they generally work. They build on established Farscape lore and perfectly embody the show's signature weirdness, with Rigel carrying Crichton's child for much of the runtime, being used not only as a comedic goldmine, but also as a source of genuine tension. However, at times there can be so much going on in the miniseries that certain characters become lost in the shuffle. For example, Jules' considerable change in personality and expanded skill set isn't afforded much time for exploration before she and the priests of Arnesk are brutally annihilated by the Scarran Emperor. Scorpius is another such casualty, as with much of Season 4, there's a sense he's overstayed his presence in the story. He resembles more of an anti-hero in the Peacekeeper Wars, as opposed to the revenge-driven monster he excelled as. His silent nodding of approval as the Scarrans and Peacekeepers sign a treaty at the end seems especially out of character. All that being said, the fast pace of the miniseries does work for the most part. In condensing a season's worth of stories into 3 hours, there's a greater sense of finality to the miniseries. Perhaps in tribute to the fans of the series, much of the Peacekeeper Wars feels like a victory lap. Almost every recurring character makes an appearance, serving as their last hurrah before the end. Scenes which could have felt like fan service feel earned, such as Erin giving birth while wielding a pulse rifle in the middle of a battle, and the entire main cast triumphantly blasting their way through the Scarran army as Guy Gross's score kicks into high gear. The bold story turns come one after another, such as Jules' aforementioned death, but it's Dargo's heroic end which packs the heaviest punch.
It's gonna get ugly here soon. You better get going. You're the closest friend I have. You could have done better. Now we're in the universe.
Dargo may have began the series as an insecure teenager, but over the course of the series he proved himself. His emotions are always strong, but he became the one person everybody could count on. Dargo never lied to the Moya crew, never deserted his post, and never put his own desires above others, which can't honestly be said for the rest of the crew. But much like Crichton and Erin's end in bad timing, Dargo's death feels so tragic because after everything he's been through, his life was finally starting to come together. His relationships with Shiana and his son Jothi are finally repaired, and it looks like at long last he has a future to look forward to. But in this final battle, it's all ripped away.
I'll find you. Come on, I'll find you. The first Scarran you see, you tell him who his daddy is. Tell him, Dargo!
Yet in his final moments, he fully embodies the proud and heroic Luxon warrior he always aspired to be. The standout sequence of the miniseries, however, is easily the climax, where Crichton, backed into a corner with no options left, finally summons the long-sought-after wormhole weapon. The scene builds slowly. The eerie music and slow pace convey a sense that these characters have crossed a dangerous cosmic threshold they may not be able to step back from.
Isn't that sweet? Baby's gonna grow.
As the singularity grows, its sheer power is made clear as it rips through both Scarran and Peacekeeper fleets, as well as the planet below. The leaders of both fleets, totally self-assured at first, soon become indignant as the gravity well grows. Finally, Greza and the Scarran Emperor can only watch in stunned silence, finally comprehending the magnitude of what they arrogantly believed they could control.
Wormhole weapons do not make peace. Wormhole weapons don't even make war. They make total destruction.
Wormhole doubles 2 more times. Moya goes first. 20 seconds later, you join us. Either way, this war is over.
For the sake of our children, I will agree to a settlement.
The fallout of this event is allowed to linger throughout the conclusion, as a comatose Crichton finally says goodbye to Harvey and reawakens to his newborn child. It's a sequence which aptly symbolises the rebirth of the galaxy itself, as it enters a new era of peace. After all the running, fighting and death, Crichton and Erin are finally given their fairy tale ending, and it's fair to say they earned it. The Peacekeeper Wars may stumble in some places, but ultimately it succeeds as the triumphant ending Farscape fans had hoped for.
This is your playground.
Farscape occupies a strange place in pop culture. Despite once being hailed as the Sci-Fi Channel's flagship show, and despite being enjoyed by dedicated viewers across the world, Farscape has never truly broken into the mainstream the way other sci-fi shows of this era have. Star Trek is a pop culture juggernaut, Stargate's iconography is recognisable to many, and even Babylon 5 is praised by mainstream publications for its pioneering production techniques and narrative ambition. But Farscape seems destined for cult success only. The story of Farscape was continued in a series of comic books by Boom Studios, and Brian Henson frequently entertained the idea of bringing the saga to the big screen, but the former never found an audience outside of pre-existing fans, and the latter will likely never materialize. Attempts at other spin-off media like video games, tabletop RPGs, and novels either flopped or failed to take off. Farscape was perhaps too weird and too dense for its own good. At a time when science fiction on the small screen was undergoing a major transformation, the series got lost in the shuffle in its initial run and seemed virtually impenetrable to newcomers in syndication. Farscape may never have crossed into the mainstream, but within sci-fi circles, it continues to be a highly acclaimed and respected show to this day. Farscape's biggest pop culture impact is most apparent in James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy. Gunn even went to the effort of including Ben Browder in a small cameo as a nod to the influence Farscape had on his films. Some may say that the success of Guardians of the Galaxy is evidence that Farscape was simply ahead of its time, but I'm not sure there was a time for Farscape. Farscape is something special and unique, a mythos which flies in the face of genre conventions and TV traditions and looks like it's having a blast while doing so. It has an infectious and strange energy which cannot be found anywhere else, even within the works it inspired. It may not have been a crossover hit, but it will always find its fans, and fans will always love it. because there's simply nothing else quite like Farscape. Thank you for watching. This is my last video of the year, and at the time of release I'll be away on holiday, and I hope those of you watching enjoy your holidays as well. In fact, here's a gift idea: buy a friend or family member Farscape on Blu-ray. Don't waste time hunting for it on streaming or anything like that. Just get the box set so you can enjoy this weird, wonderful show whenever you like. If you like what I do on this channel, giving the video a like and subscribing will be a big help, and if you want to see retrospectives early, uncut and ad-free, join me over on my Patreon where you can also see some exclusive video essays and commentaries. Speaking of which, I'd like to thank all of my patrons who are currently scrolling by, with an ultra thanks to Bano, Dent the Air, Extreme Streamers, Tom, Dusk, Colin Camille, Patrick Fleming, Matthew Camille, Ed Mark Starr, Dylan Thomas, Lilac Yane, Howard Craig Akervik, and Caging G. Thank you once again for watching, and for a great year. I've got some big projects coming in 2024, so stay tuned for them. Until next time, have a good one, live long and prosper, and...
Merry Frelling Christmas.